They don't come here to attack us because we're rich and we're free. They come and they attack us because we're over there.
We don't need to go populist left or populist right. We don't need to embrace neo-Marxism or neo-fascism, these disastrous movements from the 20th century. Turns out the answer is pretty much our Bill of Rights, our story. Embrace freedom. That's the answer.
And if the LP has a purpose, it's not to put people to sleep. It's to wake them up.
We're here because we love liberty, and we're here because we hate injustice. We are here to save mankind. We are here to fight.
Join us, the Libertarian Party, in perhaps the most exciting, grandest endeavor in history, the restoration of American liberty.
Ideas spread, they can't stop them. An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army or any government.
Hello and welcome to episode 55 of Decentralized Revolution, a podcast from the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus and Mises PAC. I'm Aaron Harris and I'm your host. A great episode today, episode 55. We had intended for Dr. Ron Paul to be our guest on episode 50 to kind of celebrate that milestone. That was a few weeks back, and the weekend before we were supposed to talk to Dr. Paul, of course, we got the bad news that his daughter had passed away, so we immediately messaged Ron's contact person and said, hey, we'll do it in a few weeks. So that time has come. Mike and I were able to talk to Dr. Paul earlier this week. I'm recording this on June 11th. And just wouldn't you know it, I record this from my home office in Knoxville, Tennessee. I do it kind of all myself. I'm getting better at it, but the technical side of things sometimes still gets to me. A few episodes ago, I messed up the sound a couple times on a couple of episodes, my first episodes in this home office. And so I was prepared. I had everything perfectly ready. Mike and I were, Michael Heiss, of course, and I were going to meet in our, virtual recording studio a half hour before Dr. Paul was supposed to come on and talk about things, and we'd already game planned it. But so Mike comes in at 12:30 and my sound doesn't work. And I'm like, oh, great. I made sure everything was working. My computer said my microphone was working, but Mike couldn't hear me. So we panicked and restarted computers and tried different browsers. And literally like 90 seconds before Dr. Paul sat down, we got it fixed. So I'm a little bit flustered at the very beginning, but it turned out great. Dr. Paul, of course, he didn't have a whole lot of time to give us, but anytime you get to spend with a hero and an inspiration is valuable time. And I think we got an episode that is a little bit different from most of the times you hear Dr. Paul on podcasts here in the last few years. We didn't do too much talking, which was the game plan. And we didn't ask him about current events, like, hey, what do you think about what the Fed has done this quarter? Or what do you think about the latest COVID news? He still talks about those things. And we just wanted to spend some time with him. We did. It was an honor. And we know you'll enjoy spending a little time with Dr. Paul, too. This is a special episode of Decentralized Revolution. Today we have a great guest. We also have Michael Heiss. He heard that this was going on, and I couldn't keep him away from it. But our honored guest is Dr. Ron Paul. How are you today?
Doing well, thank you. It's nice to be with you.
Thanks very much. This is the Mises Caucus podcast. And so I thought the best first question would be, when did you first hear the name Ludwig von Mises, and what happened after that?
I don't know whether I can remember the precise first time, because I knew of Mises for a good while. And for some reason, it could have been during like the Goldwater campaign or something, because they would mention Austrian economics, here and there. So I probably heard it, which means, it's been a long time ago. But I was just being introduced. Actually, I read Hayek before, and The Road to Serfdom before I started reading anything from Mises. But it was pretty early on.
Go ahead. Mike.
So Dr. Paul, I've read a pamphlet that you had wrote a while back called Austrian Economics, or Mises and Austrian Economics: A Personal View. And in that pamphlet, you had said that it was the example of Mises's character, as well as the confidence that you would gain from the Austrian school that kept you sane in the daily circus of Washington. So obviously Mises was highly influential to you. So what was the most influential work on you by Mises, and what was your greatest takeaways from his work?
Well, I started by reading his shorter books, whether it was bureaucracy or the various things, and he had a lot of short ones, and they were easier. But I think the one that I spent the most time on, because it took me a long time to read it, and I do a lot of underlining, was Human Action. And I think that's had a lot of effect on me. And it's something that it took a long time for me to absorb all that. But it was something that I enjoyed doing. But from Mises, I did meet a lot of the other Austrian economists, and I did hear Mises lecture one time, and it did have a lot of influence. That pamphlet you were talking about, it's interesting. I had an invitation before I got out of Congress to go to Czech Republic, because they were publishing in Czech Mises's Human Action, and asked if I would come over and help celebrate the publication of that. And my wife and I got invited, and we went over. But I took that pamphlet and I passed that out. I didn't have any real feedback on it, but really the theme of that little pamphlet was that Mises was more of a utilitarian, and Murray was more of a moralist. I mean, the principles of liberty. And I agreed with Murray on that. But I always praised Mises, and I thought it blended quite well, because I start with morality. You have a right to your life, and it's your life, and you can do what you want, that sort of thing, and that leads you to free market economics. But Mises was more in a way of presenting his views objectively and saying, this is what I do, and this A, B, C, D, and he was analyzing things, and he came to the conclusion that somebody like Murray and me, we would start with, we have our freedoms, and there it goes. And I've often said in my speeches that even if we got poorer, I'd accept the conditions of more liberty, but we don't have to worry about that, because the freer you are, the more wealth there will be. But I like Mises because he sort of brought us together on this, because he was the one that was analyzing it strictly from, if you do these things, what are the consequences of it? And his investigations and writings and theories said that you're going to have more wealth if you don't have wage and price controls. That things are better off. And we might say the other side would be, we don't want wage and price controls because it's a moral issue. People shouldn't be telling us what to do. But I liked it because Mises brought it together, and I thought he sort of verified, even if you start off with a moral principle, that you come up with in the same way as somebody trying to analyze it. So I think this is what Mises did. He confirmed that the moral issue was the right way to go, or he wasn't objecting to it, and the two can come together, and that makes one a firm believer in Austrian free market economics.
Yeah, I would add to that I think the moral imperative that's in the message is more intuitive, whereas the utilitarian argument is more analytical. So I think it's more inspiring to kind of start from that moral position, and I think that's why your campaigns were so effective. But you had mentioned Rothbard, so that's who we wanted to get into next. So obviously you knew Murray, and I believe he was involved in your '88 campaign, and a lot of our audience is big fans of Mises, big fans of Rothbard, big fans of the Mises Institute. So Do you have any like fun stories from your times with Murray Rothbard that the audience might enjoy?
Well, there's a lot of stories, and just his character was something else. There were some things that were really pretty silly, things that he liked that I sort of chuckled at, because he liked to listen to soap operas, and that just baffled me. Here's this Murray Rothbard, a giant in economics, and of course he didn't go to bed until in the wee hours of the morning. He would stay up and talk with us as long as we wanted, and then he would sleep in. But when he got up, he watched the soap operas, and I considered that rather funny that he would do that. But it must have been a form of relaxation for him. And I don't know exactly when he wrote. It must have been late at night. When he wasn't at one of our meetings or conventions or something, he probably stayed up late at night doing his work. But his schedule was a little bit weird. He also, you mentioned the '88 campaign. Yes, I blamed him for getting me involved, and I used to really go after him. What'd you get me involved in this with? So it was Murray and Bert Blumert. I imagine you know Bert Blumert's name, and they were very, very good friends. And I got to know Murray a lot there. But the Gold Commission, where Murray came and did research in D.C., that would have been in 1981, I would think. That would be when the Gold Commission met, and that came out as a consequence of a bill that Jesse Helms and I passed, and that was to study gold as money in the international monetary system. And Murray spent some time with us there. But I knew, and of course, because he was with Lou Rockwell, a partner in a letter, our report it was, and then of course in '88 it was. I always blame Bert and Murray for getting me involved in that campaign, and it's with tongue in cheek. I mean, there was a lot of agony in doing that, and knowing exactly what it meant and the consequences of it. But I had a goal, which was a consequence of something that happened 50 years ago this year, and that was the elimination of the Bretton Woods Agreement and the unleashing of the Federal Reserve System. And so this was something that was very, very important. And he was on the Gold Commission, and we did a dissenting viewpoint, which got published as The Case for Gold. But the closest I came to meeting Mises was hearing him in one of his last lectures given. He was on a tour shortly before he died, a year or so before he died in the early '70s, and he came to Houston, and I took the afternoon off from my medical practice. But I thought, oh, nobody will be there because nobody heard of him. So I traveled. It was 50 miles up to Houston, went up there, and I thought, well, they showed me the room where he was a small room, but it was jam-packed, and they were overflowing, standing in the hallways. I had to stand at the door to listen to him, and I thought, thinking back on it, I thought, that was probably pretty magnificent, because nobody ever heard of him. Nobody thought you would say, he's the most important teacher we ever had. He was denied even a job teaching in a real university. And yet, the truth about what he was writing about, even back then, was well known among many young people. So it was a lesson that I learned. And he lectured on socialism at the time. That he had a little booklet called Socialism. So I can't say, I met him, but I did meet him as him being a lecturer. But other than that, not. But I got to know Murray much better. And of course, he worked with Lou Rockwell and continued to do that. And it was such a shame, because I always thought that Austrian economists would live to old age. Hayek and Mises, they made late 80s and 90s, and Leonard Reed and all. But Murray, unfortunately, died at a younger age. He loved politics, I'll tell you what. Sometimes he made me a little nervous about it, because I thought I thought he'd do anything to just get involved, and he would get involved in Republican politics, and And if he wasn't trying to get me to do something in the Libertarian Party, he was really, when Pat Buchanan was running, he says, "Oh no, this is the strategy we're going to you should run against Pat Buchanan." And he almost talked me into that. And I thought, that's craziness. I'm not going to do that. I thought Murray was weak on the issue. Why give the Republicans and give Buchanan any benefits? So I didn't do that, and I think I was smart. But the one thing about doing that in 1988 is that it was hard. It was traveling. It wasn't like I got to travel in the 2008 and 2012 election, because all of a sudden there was somebody out there, people were out there that wanted me to do it, and they would send money and said, "Fly in an airplane, get around and do whatever you can." But back then, I would go to the colleges. Every college had at least 3 or 4 libertarians, around. And there'd be small groups, and I made the travels and did it. And I thought, well, theoretically, the theory was that I'm still reaching people. And that was my goal, is to reach people that are curious and they want to know about it. But it was something that you just don't know how much good it does. Just like I'm amazed at how many people I come across now that heard me speak in 08 or in 12, and they were teenagers, and now they have their own organization. So you have no idea how the message of liberty can spread. So the final conclusion of this little point was there were so many people, although there were few people, there were so many of them that showed up again. In the Libertarian, in my congressional races, the presidential races, and still staffers. I think there's somebody that works for the Mises Institute was a staffer. I ran a lot of staffers that had moved on and have become very important in the libertarian movement. And we have no idea what the benefits are. So Leonard Reed was a good friend, and I really admired him. He says, "Don't worry about the numbers. Worry about what you know and be informed. Somebody's going to make use of it, use of you to promote the issues. And the whole thing is you have to have people in leadership that influence other people. And when the prevailing attitude is a certain thing, then the things will change." And a little bit of that's happening right now. I continue to try to change that. We have our Liberty Report and a lot of other people speaking out. And I think the attitudes, it's been rough at competing with the monopoly on the control of the lockdown. But now people are catching on. People are sick of it. And we're just about to enjoy some lightening up of those regulations in Texas. I was telling Daniel today when we were on our program, I said, isn't it really sad that we have to be excited about the return of a smidgen of our liberty? I said, that was supposed to be natural, but I was sort of making a pun of that. Yeah, we're glad about it, but it is rather sad that we have to fight for a speck of liberty and try to convert people because the prevailing attitude has been on the other side. But the prevailing attitude has changed on COVID in the last 6 months or so, and that's why there's been some places opening up. And I'm delighted to see somebody like DeSantis getting attention because he did take a different position. And that's why, even though we might feel alone, whether we're doing it as an individual in education or whether we're doing it in the Libertarian Party or the Republican Party, it's really, the vehicle is irrelevant. It's the message. And Leonard Reed always emphasized that you have to understand what the message is, and you have to work it, trying to present this to people who don't know what it is about. And that's what I think I enjoy the most is talking to people. A decent, reasonable, liberal, progressive that's willing to talk, I think is the most interesting things to do because they'll ask honest questions. And in Washington, I operated that way, tried to get along with all the Democrats and progressives. And guess what? 3 or 4 of them actually did ask me some questions about where am I coming from, because they didn't understand it. And that sounds like silly, couple people here and there. But I tell you what, you get a couple young people excited and about what they're doing, and this is what I always told people after they listened to one of my talks, and I say, okay, Ron, we agree with you and all this. Tell us what we have to do. I was like, do whatever you want to do. You got to pass. You got to move the message. And I had my way of doing it, and most of it was an accident. Where I got to, but it made a big difference. The fact that I had a seat in Congress. People say, should I run for Congress like you did? I said, absolutely not. Don't do that. Don't set your goal as to run for Congress. And that was never my goal. And it turned out that I was there a long time. As far as seniority goes, I should have been the chairman. So in conventional wisdom, I was a total failure. I had one bill passed to emphasize the fact that we ought to study gold as real money. The Constitution says it. Sounds like a good idea. But no, it's something that it has to be done philosophically, and you have to have leadership there, and people will change their mind. And I think I actually come across as an optimist. I think what I'm seeing with young people and what I saw in the campaigns, and I thought I was delighted at one campaign event at Berkeley, California. Everybody, and they said, oh, yeah, the Wall Street people are there. They're going to cause trouble. No, we didn't have any trouble. And there's both those campaigns. I might say that it could be harder these days. Rand's getting a bit more heat of it. And it is a mixed bag, and that's why being involved, like you two are, you're involved, you're trying to work. And the issue is, what is the message? Base it on, I like to base it on a basic moral principle, and learn how to convince people that it's the safest way to go. Because I explain, how can we have this philosophy based on a moral issue of peace, a moral issue of prosperity, and not do better? We don't do so well, but where we lose out is the aggressiveness of the bad people wanting to be in politics. So the country's not like the people we hear about in Washington. They're the aggressors, and too many other people are too complacent. They don't care and they don't do much. But I think it's a job of waking people up and getting them excited about Austrian economics and liberty and the reasons for it, and the fun that you can have in associating with other people that are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, I am one of those young people you talked about. I don't know if you remember this, but the first time I ever met you was at the very end of your congressional career, and I had organized an End the Fed rally at every bank and subbank in the country simultaneously, and that earned me a meeting with you, and that helped accelerate my philosophical evolution. And now here we are, and what we focus on as the Mises Caucus within the Libertarian Party is decentralization. We really focus realistically. That was another piece of advice you gave me at the Mises 35th anniversary, is to be realistic. And how we maintain being realistic is focusing at the local level, focusing on nullification and decentralization. And to jump back one more time, I don't know if you knew this, but I'm pretty sure there is audio of that speech in Dallas that Mises gave that you attended on the Mises Institute's website. So we'll have to.
I was in Houston. You mean?
I'm sorry, Houston. Yeah, Houston.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
So we'll put that in the show notes. But
let me say something about the decentralization, because I think that is
absolutely
good. But if you continue with that thought, the next thought is the real decentralization is individual liberty, and everybody's responsible for their life. But decentralization in a political sense is a very good point to make.
Absolutely. And like you said, like you turn on the news and they'll have you think that there's all this hate and there's all this fighting and all this stuff. But then you just go to your local park, go to a basketball game, go to your kid's school, and generally speaking, people cooperate. And that's what this is all about. And I think at that local level, we can infiltrate the culture and engage the culture and put that message of individual liberty out while also achieving political decentralization from the Leviathan state. So I know we've only got about 10 more minutes with you. So obviously we're the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus. The Libertarian Party, frankly, in my and most of the people in the caucus's opinion, has not given you the respect that you deserve. And it's had a lot of ups and downs. And it's you can make the argument that it's had some more downs than ups in recent history. So what I was wondering, like, in your mind, if the Libertarian Party was living up to its potential and fulfilling the role that it ought to be filling, what would that look like? You know, what is that role?
Well, I see it in light of how I saw my own campaign. Mine was always designed for education, and influence. I've often told people that I have no desire for power. I don't want any control over other people, but I don't mind having been said that I had a little bit of an influence, on the views. And then when I look at, the drug war, I was the only one there, maybe another person that argued against the drug war early on. When I ran in '88 as a libertarian, that was a big issue because I felt so strongly about it, and I never used the drugs or anything else. But I think the drug war and what's going on now is a result of a libertarian thought. This goes there, but I also am critical of the details of it, because a lot of people, if I'm at a group, which that's one of their big issues, I say, yes, Ron Paul's for the legalization of marijuana. And I say, no, wait a minute. I said, that's not my position. I'm for the legalization of freedom, of choice. And marijuana is just a side effect, making the point that you get to make your decisions on anything you want. Whether it's what you put in your body or how you waste your time or spend your money, but you have to be responsible for all your actions. And that's quite a bit different. But I think, and I think the Federal Reserve is a big deal now. Everybody, much more so than they did back in the 70s. Nobody had, when the people would come up and say, why do you keep talking about this Federal Reserve back in '76? Of course, the main reason I decided to speak out was the 1971 breakdown of the Bretton Woods. So I think that these issues are very, very important, and they have to be changed. I think they are. I think the libertarian message has been there. So I do get frustrated when somebody calls themselves a libertarian group and we're miles apart on maybe foreign policy. You have to apply it to foreign policy. You have to apply it to economic policy. You have to apply it to personal liberty. And the non-aggression principle should answer that question. And I think I use so often the Bastiat example that, people do understand that young people, when I go to the college, they understand this thing about, you shouldn't hurt people and you shouldn't take their things. You can't steal from them. And then they sort of say, yeah, that's true. I said, yeah, but if you decide that you need something, is that a right? Can you send your congressman and do exactly what you wouldn't do on a level? This whole idea that people understand moral principles much better, at that level, individuals shouldn't steal, but they don't think for a minute about the stealing that government does, and taxes and inflation is always stealing to do things. So they and what the gun issue is another one. I tell them I'm really opposed to guns. I would make sure that all the guns were taken away from the bureaucrats of government, and there's a couple 100,000 of them that have it. So we want more gun control there, but we want the guns to go to the people for defending themselves against invasion and against the government if it gets off base.
You've touched on the breakdown of Bretton Woods, and that was both the catalyst for your original run, and it was also the catalyst for the founding of the Libertarian Party. And the role that you cast for the Libertarian Party is actually the same or very similar to the role that was cast by the founders of the Libertarian Party and David Nolan. So fully in agreement there, and we are doing our best to try to help the party recapture that spirit, and we're doing quite well. We are now well instituted in more than half of the state parties, and we were more than 40% of the last national convention, and it's just going to grow. So
right. Good
Final,
news.
yeah, we could. I would love to tell you more about that. So my final question for you is: you have had a long and an incredible journey in this this quest for freedom. At what moments did it feel the most meaningful to you? What was going on, and what were you doing that when it felt the most meaningful and like you were achieving the most good?
Well, that's a hard question. There's been a lot of episodes where emotionally you might feel good about how things are going. We had a few of those moments, and I have to admit I really enjoyed going to the campuses. A lot of young people, and they were very supportive, and that to me was always a satisfaction that the message can be delivered and it will be accepted. And that to me was sort of the message that I liked. And but there's been a whole lot. I tell people all the time that it can be very tiring and dangerous. Just look at the trouble Rand, the things they do to him. It's dangerous, and all these things that go on. But when you get together, when you get a group together, which you do, I'm sure, all the time, you got to have some fun doing it, because tomorrow and the next day we're not so sure what's going to happen. So in the meantime, if it's a bore, one thing that I've been watching now, and this is a lesson of the opposite thing that you were asking me, is when I look at the opposition, how miserable they are. And if you look at CNN is one of them, but MSNBC is another one. But CNN, they have a panel and they're all part of CNN. They look like the saddest people in the world. They just look so miserable. And I think there should be more enjoyment, in doing it. And there's reason, because if people move in our direction, they're all going to be better off. But it's back to the education. I think it's so important. And that's, of course, why I became, I was very helpful. Well, I shouldn't make a judgment call. I tried to be very helpful with Lou in getting the Mises Institute started. And I think that's very, very important, that there's a moral element to it. There's an intellectual element to it. There's a fun element to it. And then a positive attitude that happens. So, you were mentioning a little bit about not most of the people you meet are pretty decent people. And I've said that many times, times. I said, if I think about, I've probably lived in 6 or 7 different places, being in medicine and college and military and all these things. I said, the neighborhoods were always very nice. We always, got along together. And we went to churches. We always met people that were friendly. And I really didn't see many mean and nasty people. That doesn't mean that I think people are all perfect, and I haven't met some. But basically, the overwhelming number of people that I've dealt with over the years have been pretty nice people. But I think when you look at what's going on, especially, there's a couple people in both parties, but more so in the Democratic Party. I don't know whether I'd like to have them as my neighbor. They don't seem to be very friendly at all. But they look very, very sad. Look at them next time you look at them, and when they're involved in a panel discussion, they have something that I think Ben Franklin said. We cannot, if we present the Constitution, we cannot have long faces. I'll tell you what, you look at those programs, those interviews and television, you see a lot of long faces. They're very unhappy people, because our message should be enlightening. Just like if you're satisfied and happy with your spiritual beliefs, it should not make you sad and miserable. And I think that's the way it should be politically. And I think coming together with like-minded people, you say, well, they're all believers. What good is it to me to talk to people who already believe? Well, just for a little bit of support and maybe get another idea, because you never have perfect knowledge. And this is why I like to go to conferences. I went to a conference this past weekend. I talked to a lot of young people, but I'm interested in talking to them and finding out what their views are. And a lot of them will have, good perceptions, and they will be 80% there and then there'll be some disagreement and on another issue. And right now, the biggest challenge I have with just about all age groups is this thing about foreign policy, how it's 110% China's fault for why we're going to have a World War III real soon. And they don't look at it objectively. And there's a different opinion and a different scenario if you look at what's really going on.
Well, I know that's about the end of your time, so I will just say that another quote of yours is that any good revolution needs young people and music, and it was that spirit that made the revolution that sprung up around you so fun and so endearing. And I'm so happy to say that what you're describing is what is flooding into the Mises Caucus. We are having so many young entrepreneurs, young professionals, musicians, comedians. There's a real culture forming up, and our events are growing. Like there's now, like our last event had nearly 400 people at it, and there's comedy and people having a good time and all of that. So, thank you for that.
Yeah,
and,
let me add one thing. Music can be used as a sneak attack. If you work your way into conventional music, but you have that message, they'll be absorbing like the far left. They're always saturating ourselves with the bad information. But no, I like the idea. There were quite a few songs sung and written for our campaign, and I enjoyed that.
Dr. Paul, it's we could sit and talk to you all day, but you have a job as you're the most productive, busy, retired person I know. You're working with the your Institute for Peace and Prosperity, so we know you've got some work to do today, and we're just very grateful that you were able to carve out some time for us. Mike does want to ask you a question off the record here in a second, but again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Nice being with you.
And there you have it. I'd like to thank Dr. Ron Paul for sharing his time and so much of his wisdom, and for, of course, his unparalleled work advancing liberty, for inspiring the Mises Caucus. It's hard to put into words what he means to all of us. Thanks also to Chris Rossini, Dan McAdams, everyone affiliated with Dr. Paul and his Institute for Peace and Prosperity. Thanks to Michael Heiss for coming on too, as if I could have kept him away. But really, in all truth, I just really enjoyed watching Mike interact with Dr. Paul, knowing how much he means to Mike and the whole idea behind the Mises Caucus. I'll have links to some cool stuff on the show notes page at decentralizedrevolution.com/55, including audio of the speech by Mises at the University of Houston in 1972 that Dr. Paul talks about. Thanks to Dave vs. Goliath for all the music you hear on Decentralized Revolution. And thanks to everyone who subscribes to our email list and gives to Mises PAC at takehumanaction.com, and everyone who shares, rates, reviews, and subscribes to Decentralized Revolution. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. The episode will be up fairly quickly with Sheldon Richman talking about Israel-Palestine. We'll see you.